Till 2013, I was stuck at 32% body fat in the infamous yo-yo cycle. Energized starts, temptations or busy life smash it all, regain, repeat it again and again. And then I applied the habits in this book, and 6 months later, I was down to 20% body fat. And the strange part is it had nothing to do with food or workouts. See, most weight loss advice is what this book calls the personality ethic. It's a collection of external tactics, keto, fasting, high-intensity intervals, or the latest supplement. These are just the leaves on a tree. They look good for a season, but if the roots are rotten, the leaves will always wither. The 7 habits in this book are based on character ethic, the deep roots that hold up a life-giving banyan tree. When you lock these in, they nourish every area of your life, your productivity, your relationships, and yes, your weight loss. If you've been overwhelmed by the hundreds of weight loss hacks out there, I have good news. You can ignore the noise. In this video, I'm going to show you how I mapped the 7 fundamental habits for permanent weight loss. The first habit, be proactive, sounded so obvious I almost skipped it entirely. Because I was proactive. Every Sunday, I meal prepped. I scheduled my gym times. I was ready. But be proactive stuck in my mind. And in the days after reading the book, I started noticing that whenever work got unexpectedly busy, I'd fall off the wagon. If I went out with friends, I'd give in to the extra chips and guac, and then abandon my plan for days. Throw in a vacation or anything atypical, and the entire plan went out the window. Every single time I fell off track, I was being reactive. Sure, I could stick to things when I planned ahead, like I always did at the start of a new diet. The problem was, I was planning for a fantasy version of myself living a perfectly predictable life. I was never planning for my real, messy, stressful life. But here's the catch. If you try to straight up plan ahead like a book suggests, you'll probably plan wrong. My attempt to get ahead of busy work weeks, the times I'd normally finish off entire bags of chips, was to pack healthy crudité. But when the moment actually arrived, I realized I didn't want the crudité. I realized it wasn't about having convenient food while I was busy. It was about dreading the 3:30 p.m. status update meeting. I wanted stress relief, not food. The real proactive plan wasn't meal prep. It was telling a friend at work what I was going to say at the meeting so I could rehearse it and feel better. Why we think we do something tends to be very different than why we actually do it. You can't create a proactive plan if you're trying to solve the wrong problem. You have to uncover the real script running in your head. So for weight loss, step 1 of being proactive is simple. When you go off plan, take 30 seconds to jot down the verbatim dialogue in your mind. Don't judge it, just write it down and set it aside. Step 2 happens at the end of the week. Look at your notes and identify the biggest pattern in why you went off track. Figure out exactly where it sits in your habit chain. Is it the trigger, the craving, the action, or the reward? Once you spot it, plan for the absolute smallest mitigation you can think of for next week. The power of this is that you're fundamentally changing your mental scripts. It's the difference between acting as someone who things happen to, life got in the way, versus acting as someone who makes things happen. But you'll find this tedious after a week unless you tie it to the second habit, begin with the end in mind. Again, this sounds obvious, until I looked at what I was actually doing. I kept jumping onto diets I knew I couldn't sustain for life, just because I figured weight loss had to be an endless grind of hunger and restriction. If you ask me how I plan to maintain the weight once I reached my goal, I just hand wave that away. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't weight loss supposed to be full of hunger and restrictions? Think about this. At some point in your life, you were at your goal weight. If you calculate how much you have gained since then and divide it by the number of weeks that have passed, I guarantee it averages out to less than a pound a week. And if you charted it, some weeks you didn't gain anything at all. It was a messy, non-linear climb. Reversing your way back down treads the exact same terrain. It's our haste to get to the end quickly that makes us want to force that chart into an unnatural straight line. And since you can't fight the natural laws of biology, you keep setting yourself up to fail. But why are we in such a hurry in the first place? Because we treat weight loss as an annoying chore to check off a list. But weight loss is a vehicle to becoming the self you aspire to be. For me, that was someone with healthier coping mechanisms than food. Someone who could set and achieve a goal that affected no one but me. But it's easy to mistake society's goals for your own. Here's what a real functional fit body looks like. And here's what social media has taught us to believe a fit body looks like. People are flocking to bodybuilding workouts when their actual goal is longevity, which requires far more diversity in movement. When we are even slightly murky on what we want, the loudest voice in the room takes over, and it's never ours. The book gives one prompt that cuts straight to the heart of this. Visualize being at your own funeral. Categorize the people in your life, your partner, kids, friends, peers, managers, and write down what you want each group to be saying in your eulogy. Specifically, what experiences did they have with you? Take 2 minutes after this video and jot down a few bullet points. Then pin it on your bathroom mirror for 2 reasons. First, as a reminder to start adding those experiences to your life now while you're still losing weight. This is what makes the messy middle, the be proactive habit, the non-linear weeks, all of it, not just sustainable, but genuinely enjoyable. Second, you want to edit it on the go as inspiration strikes. Don't go too hard. Never spend more than 2 minutes on the edits. Now we have the end in mind, but where do we actually start? Most plans answer this by getting you to overhaul everything at once. Keto, severe macro restrictions, cutting entire food groups. These plans are designed this way because they're trying to support your expectation of a linear slide back down to goal weight. Even intermittent fasting, which looks like barely any change on the surface, eventually requires multi-day fasts to keep progressing, which means skipping meals with friends and family. My guess is, I wish we had had more meals together isn't something you'd want someone saying at your eulogy. But if you've given up the linear weight loss expectation, you can give up the extreme plans too. So then what do you do first? You probably know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What I found is that weight loss maps one-on-one to Maslow's pyramid. And at every level, just 20% of the right effort brings 80% of the results. But most plans never teach you about the top 2 levels of the pyramid. And the bottom 3 levels are filled with throwing the entire kitchen sink at you right from the start, demanding advanced workout splits, perfect macros, and intuitive eating. While in reality, you only need to focus on 1 to 2 habits per level. I've coached thousands of people, all of whom spent years losing weight. And yet when they joined, I found they were all stuck at level 1. You're also here if you have not yet checked off these criteria. Vision. I schedule and do my eulogy experiences now. Biology. I've eaten in a mild 15% calorie deficit for the past 3 weeks. Reality. My eating approach actually fits my typical schedule, not my imaginary perfect week. Only once you master that, you move up to other levels of the pyramid, which tackle things like hunger regulation, designing your environment, and shifting your identity. I made a full video on this that you can watch afterward using the link in the description below. Now, you know exactly what to do, but let's be honest, you aren't going to nail it every single week. And that is exactly where the 4th habit swoops in. Think win-win. The book breaks down every deal into 4 outcomes: win-win, win-lose, lose-win, and lose-lose. In weight loss, the 2 things you're negotiating between are scale wins and your non-scale eulogy wins. If you've been doing the overhaul your life plans, you usually bounce between win-lose, the scale drops, but you miss out on life because what you're doing is unsustainable, and lose-lose. Not only do you miss out on life, but the scale also goes up. And long-term, extreme diets tend to burn out to lose-lose because data shows most people regain all the weight they lost within 5 years. But by shifting to the hierarchy of needs approach, the game changes. You always have a win. So the habit here is simple. At every check-in, ask yourself 2 questions. What was my scale win this week? And what was my eulogy win? Both count. Both fuel you forward. This combination is a fuel source that actually lasts. But what if you're doing everything right and the scale still hasn't budged? That's where habit 5 comes in. Seek first to understand. We tend to treat our bodies like a black box. Actually, even worse than that. When our body signals hunger, cravings, low energy, or stress, we view them as annoying obstacles trying to ruin our plans. But those signals are the language your body speaks. We constantly ignore what our body is trying to tell us. We push harder and then act surprised when it just goes on strike. We interpret that strike as our body being broken, when really all we need to do is establish a conversation. And opening that conversation takes 2 simple steps. First, you need to track your body's reactions using a simple traffic light system. Give your week a green if these are true 5 or more days. Stable energy throughout the day, hunger only after 3.5 to 4 hours since your last meal, and you're sleeping through the night. Yellow if these show up repeatedly. A midday energy slump, hunger within 2 to 3 hours of your last meal, and feeling slightly wired at night. Red if most days you're fried, hungry within an hour of eating, sleeping poorly, and your libido has disappeared. Second, decide what to do with that feedback. If you're yellow, you need a tweak. If you're red, there's a fundamental biological misfit, which means you need a major pivot, or in some cases, a strategic quit. I have a whole video walking through the 27 cases that happen and exactly how to tweak your plan for each one. You can watch that after this video using the link in the description. But I'm sure you've done lists of habits like this before, only to abandon them a few weeks later. That's because you were missing habit 6, synergize. Synergy simply means that the whole process is greater than the sum of its parts, but most weight loss plans are the exact opposite of synergistic. Let's say you followed your diet to a T, but at your weekly check-in, you haven't lost any weight. Standard diet advice tells you to make your nutrition stricter and exercise more. But when you do that, your hunger and cravings skyrocket. Your body craves stability, so when you make drastic changes, it freaks out and hits the brakes on your metabolism. Suddenly, you're putting in twice the effort for zero results. By trying to fix one isolated part of the process, you actually broke the entire system. Now look at what happens when we stop treating these 5 habits like a checklist and arrange them as a system. First, you start at your goal. You begin with the end in mind. By anchoring your eulogy experiences, you've already set yourself up to be in a win-win. Then you move to first things first and decide on just 1 to 2 changes from the hierarchy of needs for the coming week. You execute those changes with the mindset of a scientist. It's just an experiment. During this experiment, you take the time to observe your thoughts and change your mental scripts. As you add that proactive buffer, disturbances like stress, taking breaks, or just life happening have less and less impact on you. This allows you to stick to your 1 to 2 changes for longer stretches of time. This is your reinforcing loop. This is the magic. Life's upsets actually make you stronger because every failure is just fresh data for your next proactive buffer. Win. Then at each weekly check-in, you seek first to understand your body's feedback, its reactions. You feed this data straight back into the win-win check. You only continue the cycle if you're in a true win-win or a lose-win that you have a step-by-step plan to flip into a win-win next week. You never settle for a win-lose or lose-lose. This is your balancing loop. It makes absolutely sure that your scale wins and your eulogy wins stay in focus every single week. Win again. To practice habit 6, you need to shift your perspective. Stop viewing weight loss as a list of rules and start treating it as a system that feeds itself, creating an upward spiral with every iteration. The 7th and the final habit cuts through the last obstacle standing between you and your goal. It's aptly named Sharpen the Saw. There's a famous parable about 2 men competing to chop down as much wood as possible in a single day. The first man hacks away relentlessly from sunrise to sunset, but the second man decided to take it easy. He took a break every single hour, and yet he wins easily. Why? Because every time he sat down to rest, he was sharpening his saw. In weight loss, we expect to be the first guy. We think we can never take a break. We believe we must be perfectly on plan the entire way through. But that's a guaranteed recipe for mental burnout. Life simply doesn't work that way. You will inevitably be thrown curveballs you couldn't anticipate, and your metabolism will naturally slow down as you lose weight, no matter how perfectly or sustainably you run your deficit. Your body, your mind, and your life all demand that you take a break from time to time. The real question is, how do you take a break without it spiraling into a month-long binge? The answer depends entirely on what is demanding the break. If it's your body, then you're experiencing one of the 27 feedback cases we talked about in Habit 5. Apply the relevant suggestion from the video linked in the description. But if it's your mind or life demanding a break, you simply switch your goal from fat loss to maintenance. This means those 1 to 2 weekly changes you were making get stripped down to a single 5-minute daily habit. For some people, this is the point and call method. Saying out loud, I'm eating this food out of hunger, craving, stress. For others, it's as simple as continuing to have a palm-sized protein at every meal, even when all other habits are on pause. To find your perfect speed bump, just identify your earliest wobble that usually leads to overeating and pick one minimal habit to stabilize it. By intentionally programming breaks and imperfect weeks into your system, you eliminate the concept of falling off the wagon entirely. You just step back, sharpen the saw, and then get right back on. But how do you apply all 7 habits as a system that's implemented right from day 1 for your life specifically, so that you don't spend months trapped in a trial and error or fall back into the old yo-yo cycle? You can do it in 2 ways. One, if you want my help, upgrading your personal weight loss operating system, that is, adapting your targets, psychology, and habits to your body, mind, and lifestyle, so you can build deep roots and finally reach your goal with peace and ease, then learn more about my weight loss program in the description and comments below. Or if you want to DIY it, then you don't want to ignore this video, where I break down the full A to Z blueprint to losing weight permanently and show you exactly how to diagnose your personal bottlenecks. It took my co-coach Lucy and I 10 years and $45,000 combined to learn all of this. So you don't want to miss the complete step-by-step breakdown here. And always remember, you can do it.